Hi, I'm Dr. Dawn Abbott from Brown Medical School in Providence, Rhode Island, and today I was one of the moderators for the late-breaking clinical trials on management of acute coronary syndromes in interventional patients. We had a tremendous array of original research presented within the field. In particular, we saw a randomized controlled trial presented by Benita Shaw looking at acute administration of colchicine prior to PCI and its effect on inflammatory markers and myocardial injury post-PCI. This study showed that in these patients, the colchicine did reduce certain markers of inflammation, in particular CRP, but this did not translate into a reduction in myocardial injury as measured by the troponin assay. There are many reasons why this trial may not have shown a benefit on myocardial injury. I think in particular it was a heterogeneous population of patients that had both stable ischemic heart disease and acute coronary syndromes, so the baseline levels of inflammation were highly variable in these patients during the first measurement after PCI. But in context of the other trials that have been presented in this meeting, including COACT, I think we see that targeting inflammation in patients with acute coronary syndrome or in those who are having anticipated myocardial injury is still a very important avenue of investigation, and hopefully Dr. Shaw will continue to study this patient population and the use of these drugs. Also, we saw a very important presentation from Usman Baber, who did a sub-study of the Twilight ACS trial, looking really at the highest risk patients in that study, those that had unstable angina with high-risk angiographic features or non-ST elevation MI. This study compared long-term monotherapy with ticagrelor alone versus aspirin and ticagrelor in those patients that were event-free at 3 months after their indexed PCI. We saw, similar to other trials in this area of drug de-escalation, that going to a single antiplatelet with ticagrelor alone showed no harm with respect to increased rates of myocardial infarction or stent thrombosis, while it reduced the risk of bleeding by 50%. So we can really help patients by tailoring their antiplatelet therapy and de-escalating those that have risk of bleeding, or potentially all patients, down to a single antiplatelet agent at the time point of 3 months that meet the criteria that were entered into that trial. I think there were 2 trials in our session that were presented on the use of mechanical circulatory support, in particular the use of Impella, which is a percutaneous left ventricular assist device that results in more support of the circulation than the intra-aortic balloon pump, which has traditionally been used. These 2 trials, one of them showed that there's been increased uptake of Impella, yet these patients are suffering from many complications like bleeding and increased risk of stroke. The other trial compared it to the use of balloon pump. Neither of these trials showed a benefit of the use of this high technology device in these patient subsets. These are observational registries. We have to be cautious. It's not to say that these devices can't or won't save lives, but it speaks to the state of the science and clinical practice right now, that there is a tremendous amount of variability in the use of these devices within and among hospitals, and that it seems we need to really focus on the indications for these devices, number one, and secondly, reducing the risk of complications when the device is chosen to be used. This could be things like access and closure, concomitant anticoagulation protocols. There's so much to be learned in this area, and I'm hoping these investigators will pursue further investigation. And I know also right now out of the US, there is a randomized trial that's going on with Impella versus IABP for shock, and we will really be looking to that study, which will be randomized, to get a better sense at how these devices perform in the highest risk patients. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak about these trials in our session this morning.